My review of Catholicism, A Very Short Introduction by Gerald O. Collins from Oxford University Press. General thoughts. I have been reading Oxford's A Very Short Introduction series for a while now. And although this book is not the worst in the series, it is far from the best. It is better than the other books in the series that concern religion and faith, but it does not reach the excellence of A. Edward Siniski's Orthodox Christianity. I will discuss the rating and ranking of this book later on in this review, but I think pairing Catholicism, A Very Short Introduction, with Orthodox Christianity, A Very Short Introduction, is an excellent choice to provide a comprehensive overview of Christian history up to the present day and to introduce the basics of Christianity. Preface. The preface is probably the best part of this book. One of the faults of the book is that every chapter seems to rework the entire history of the Catholic Church, or at least repeatedly cover the same topics. Due to this tendency to repeat himself, Gerald O. Collins' best take is his first take, which is in the preface. Here, in his goal of generalizing the entire history of the Catholic Church, he makes an admirable and comprehensive attempt. From Pentecost to Christopher Columbus. In the first chapter, O'Collins attempts to connect the historical context of the early Church of Jerusalem to the Bible, the Catholic Church, and then to the modern day with Pope Francis. He also tries to link the modern church to the earliest ancient church, and before that to the earliest forms of Judaism. While he does not always succeed, it is not due to a lack of information, but rather a problem of structure. The chapter jumps all over the place, from different time periods to different prayers to different law codes, making it difficult to follow the thread he is trying to pull or push. He ends the chapter with several conundrums: the New World, the Protestant Reformation, the growing political power of the Pope, and the Catholic Church's relations with Muslims and Jews. From Christopher Columbus to the present. In the second chapter, O'Collins does something interesting. He does not try to minimize or recontextualize the mistakes of the Catholic Church throughout history. Instead, he looks at the complaints of Protestants, Jews, and Muslims against the Catholic Church and addresses them seriously. This would be an amazing approach if he were more organized in his presentation. However, by jumping around from subject to subject and from time period to time period, it is difficult to understand the full context of the complaints he is addressing, their severity, and their resolutions. He ends this chapter by affirming the Second Vatican Council and highlighting that while the political center of Catholicism remains the Vatican in Rome, and its spiritual center remains Jerusalem with Jesus, the demographic center has shifted from the Western world to the Eastern and Southern hemispheres. Catholics on God and the human condition. In the third chapter, O'Collins covers the creeds and confessions of the Church with an eye toward history and the human condition. He affirms the Trinity, examines the heresies and the Church's responses to them, and spends considerable time looking back to the Old Testament while justifying his theology with New Testament references. He also brushes on church doctrine, statements, and papal bulls. He closes this chapter by acknowledging the final day of judgment and the sovereignty of God, the ultimate union with Christ, and the glory to be transfigured at the end of days, the sacraments and the Catholic Church. In the fourth chapter, O'Collins covers the sacraments: baptism, confirmation, Eucharist, penance, the anointing of the sick, holy orders, and matrimony. He explains how even sacramentals can be used in outreach to other groups and cultures. And he describes the development of these sacraments from tradition to dogma. He closes this chapter by strongly affirming the documents and theology of Vatican II. Catholic moral life and teaching. Chapter 5 focuses on grounding Catholic moral teaching in practical terms. Topics include just war theory, the right to life, marriage properly being between a man and a woman, and sexual ethics, such as the prohibition of condoms and the promotion of traditional marriage. The chapter also highlights Catholic charitable efforts, including providing for the poor and the founding of hospitals. These elements are all part of Catholic moral teaching, which has evolved over time along with its social doctrines. However, O'Collins spends the least amount of time elaborating on the topics covered in this chapter. Characteristics of Catholicism. In Chapter 6, O'Collins attempts to cover more ground than in previous chapters, likely to balance the shorter preceding chapter. He highlights the diverse expressions of Catholicism, noting that the Catholic Church comprises many churches and rites from different cultures. This diversity is presented as a strength rather than a weakness. O'Collins touches on common themes in Catholicism, such as the celebration of the Eucharist, the importance of the Mass, and the significance of family. He discusses the veneration of Mary and the honoring of the saints, emphasizing their role as exemplars in daily life. He also explores the liturgy of the hours, prayer, and uniquely Catholic philosophical and theological ideas, such as the Catholic both and. O'Collins highlights the Catholic ability to hold together apparent contradictions, such as the coexistence of science and faith, reason and intuition. For Catholics, it is both symbol and reality, both prayer to Jesus and veneration of Mary. The future of Catholicism. In Chapter 7, O'Collins synthesizes the ideas presented throughout the book. He asserts that Catholicism is the one true church, and that its history attests to its legitimacy. However, he does not stop there. He raises challenging questions that may seem progressive to some and heretical to others. O'Collins questions when the church will once again have female deacons, and when women will enjoy leadership roles in the secular, professional, and research aspects of the church. He addresses the ongoing issue of sex scandals and the declining number of priests, suggesting a return to allowing married priests to increase their numbers. O'Collins also highlights the changing demographics of the church. While Jerusalem will always be the spiritual center and Rome the political head, the actual demographic center of Catholicism has shifted to Latin America, Eastern Asia, and Africa. He emphasizes that the global church, especially European Catholics, must adapt to a more diverse style of worship, ritual, and leadership as more Hispanics, Asians, and Africans rise to positions of authority, reflecting the changing membership of the church. Review. My review of this book is straightforward. While it is not as good as a very short introduction to Christian orthodoxy, it surpasses the majority of the other books in Oxford's A Very Short Introduction series. This book took me longer to finish than I would have liked, not because it was difficult or lengthy, but because it was boring. I fell asleep multiple times whenever I tried to dive deeply into this book. It was not written as engagingly or as interestingly as the introduction to Orthodox Christianity. That being said, I still think that Gerald O'Collins' Catholicism, A Very Short Introduction, is a great companion to Orthodox Christianity, A Very Short Introduction, for those seeking a stronger understanding of ancient and early Christianity, as well as Christianity as it exists today. Both books lacked political bias or subterfuge, instead embracing Christian culture and expressing Christian love. I do wish both books had highlighted more about the day-to-day life of Christians and what it is like to attend church. But that might be asking too much from an introduction. Conclusion. I believe Gerald O'Collins' Catholicism, A Very Short Introduction, published by Oxford University Press in its second edition in 2017, is well worth reading if you are trying to learn about Catholicism. I would give it a 3 out of 5. A good read, but not great. Thank you and good night.